Hello, everybody. I'm Lucas Walsh. I'm Interim Dean of the Faculty of Education, and just here to give a very brief and a very warm welcome at the launch of the Conceptual Playlab. But I'll start by paying respects to the traditional owners and custodians of the land. We are in the Kulin Nation, and we respect the elders past, present, and perhaps salient, especially to this occasion, emerging and future. So we have other special guests here that I'd like to say hello to. I'd like to acknowledge Professor Brown and Professor Jefferson. Professor Jefferson is from the ARC. Welcome tonight. And a particularly big welcome, and I'm not going to draw attention to them, but in the room are Marilyn, Professor Fleer's family, mother, sister, niece, and daughter. A very warm welcome to you. It's lovely to have you here. I was going to make you stand up, but I thought that would be it. No, it's shaking of the head at the front of you. And welcome to those of you who are online. We are live streaming to a couple of hundred people, and including our colleagues and friends at the Peninsula campus and beyond. So I'm going to be brief. You're in for a real treat, because this is an actual occasion to sit in and listen on leading research. And we talk about that a lot in academia, about leading research and cutting edge research, but this is actually it. And as I've said previously, Professor Fleer is a wonderful communicator as well as being a tremendous intellect and colleague. When she got this honour, I was thrilled, as most people are. I emailed her and said, you're at the top of the mountain. And she is. She's at the top of the mountain. This is a major project that has tremendous potential to make a huge change, which is what this faculty and educators are about. And as Marilyn has also said, that you don't just get there overnight, that you don't just get to the top of the mountain overnight. It takes years of dedication, focus, and I think, from my personal understanding, an openness to the world, an openness to learning, an openness to new ideas, an openness to technology, an openness to the intersection of things that might be not necessarily visible to some, but through that perseverance and through that imagination, you're able to make those connections and direct it towards something that can potentially change the lives of people. And this, make no mistake, this is really quite revolutionary research that you're about to hear tonight. Another part of that is, as Professor Fleer's also said, it takes a community of people around her, and she'll be working in a very good team on this project. But also, I'd just like to briefly acknowledge the fact that a team of people work behind the scenes in order to make a project of this scale come together. And we have wonderful colleagues, professional and academic, within our faculty who enable really beautiful intellects to do wonderful work. And I know some of them are here tonight, so can we give them a bit of applause and thank them? All right, let's get on with the main act. I'd like to welcome to the stage Laureate Professor Marilyn Fleer for the launch of the Conceptual Playlab. Please give her a warm round of applause. And we'll start with a video.
One of the things that I've absolutely felt passionate about is that beautiful mind of a young child, so rich with possibilities. My name's Marilyn Fleer. I'm a Professor of Early Childhood Education at Monash University. My family lived on a farm in Narrikup, that's between Albany and Mount Barker. In those days, the community aspirations for young women was pretty low, and so the expectation was that I'd grow up on the farm, stay on the farm, marry the farmer's son next door. The magic moment for me was going to the local kindergarten. One child started to count the objects, and in the process of counting the objects, I became curious. When the kindergarten teacher talked about the kind of learning that was going on, the kind of thinking that the children were engaged in, I was just hooked. That was what started me on my journey to becoming an early childhood educator and later on as an academic. And I would have been 14. Early childhood has traditionally been undervalued, under-resourced. Consequently, I feel it's really important that we grow the research base. People often think that young children are these beings to be loved, but it's more than that. When we think about children as thinking people, we create an environment that's always stretching them so that that young mind's able to think in new ways. I wanted to grow the research so that we as educators in Australia have an Australian evidence-based model that is a credit model that recognises that early childhood educators are these amazing people.
Marilyn came to our school and with my class of pre-primaries she created a Playworld and demonstrated that through the story of Rosie's Walk.
Rosie the hen went for a walk.
As soon as we entered the Playworld, we were all in our characters. Group of bees.
You're the queen bee.
I'm the queen bee. Oh.
Group of foxes and group of chickens.
Who is stinging? We're stinging.
So the kids then went back to the tables and started making maps for Rosie's cousin to find Rosie. Marilyn's research for us as educators is wonderful because early childhood educators all know the value of play and how that is your cornerstone for children's natural learning. So for someone like Marilyn to be coming and saying this is paramount and this is what is going to help your learning, that is just joy for us because that push down of curriculum into early childhood is so strong, and to be able to balance that push down of curriculum with the valuable play is just perfect.
The Laureate Fellowships are the ARC's most prestigious fellowship, and they provide the funding and the opportunity for internationally recognized researchers to conduct research that is going to make a difference nationally and internationally.
When the faculty and the university asked me to put in an application, that's never going to happen. And I thought, well, why not give it a go?
The competition is fierce. Everybody who applies is well recognized to be a leader in their research field.
When I got the phone call, I thought, I can't believe this. Am I hearing this right? This is a really important moment, historic moment for early childhood educators and researchers in Australia. So educators will try out the Conceptual Playworld model that has come from my previous work. One of the tools we have involved in our research is an app, so educators can capture these imagination and science moments or engineering moments or technology moments because they're so well placed to be able to do that. They will then be talking to us about what they've learned through trying out the ideas, and we in turn will be learning the best way to modify and take this evidence-based model forward. Once the children have experienced this early childhood setting, being creative and imaginative and solving lots of interesting problems, we're hoping that these amazing people will wind up being chief scientists of the future.
Please welcome Laureate Professor Marilyn Fleer.
Thank you, Lucas. And I'd like to pay my respects to the peoples of the Kulin Nation as well. And also to Professor Teresa Jefferson for coming along all the way from Canberra to represent the Australian Research Council, and our esteemed colleague Professor Rebecca Brown, who's Senior Vice Provost and of Research at Monash, and she's next to. Yes, thank you. So our wonderful colleagues, and thank you, Lucas. I also want to, because I know that this is being streamed down to the Peninsula campus, and I just want to say yoo-hoo down there to everyone. And not everyone's there. A lot of people have come up here, but Peninsula is really important for us, and to have the research at Peninsula is really significant. And so I feel so very honoured that Professor David Kopoloff who's a Pro-Vice-Chancellor for major campuses and student engagement, is hosting the event down there. And my wonderful colleague, Dr. Mark Prynne, his senior lecturer. He's kind of like our MC, our wonderful human being who just is the glue on our campus that keeps everything moving along so beautifully. So I wanted to acknowledge the dignitaries who have made today possible, but I also wanted to, if we could have the slides up please, I also wanted to say just a few acknowledgements, and in particular I want to, and Lucas did a little bit of that, he's talked about the education marketing team. So Seshna, Lara, Chantel, Melissa, Megan, Tanya, and many, many more people who've made this possible. The video was produced by Lara and her colleagues, and the website and all the other things that surround this. As Lucas said, it's not something that happens just like that. There's a lot of people who've done some amazing work. And similarly with the student ambassadors and Melissa down at Peninsula. But what I'd like to say particularly is that we have some amazing guests here tonight. Some of them are streaming in, and I'm going to just mention a few of the countries. But also Dr. Andrew Stout, my partner, he's also online listening. So I'll do him proud, hopefully. But I wanted to mention Press Hill, the Margaret Littleton Memorial School, and Rebecca in particular. Rebecca, please wave. Where are you? Where is she hiding? Oh, there's Rebecca over there, and her team. Please, as Oriana and Cressida and Paul, who you will get to meet in the videos soon. They've seen them before, so they won't be any shocks, hopefully. But thank you. Princess Hill Primary School. I've had a wonderful, fantastic collaboration over the years with Dr. Esme Cap, who's the principal and an absolute inspiration. Esme, where are you? Over there, and I also want to acknowledge her team that she's brought along with her, but particularly Mary Featherston, who has been, many of you know her work, she's just so famous in the architectural and design space, and some of you may know about the Featherston Chair. Mary's just amazing, so she's there as part of this tonight as well. Yarraburg Children's Centre, where we're currently doing some pilot work, so thank you for coming. And Windermere Early Childhood Centre, and I know that there's representatives down at Peninsula. So hopefully you're all having a nice drink and wandering around and having a good time. So without going too far now into all the acknowledgements, otherwise there'll be no presentation, I want to say first one very important thing is that you're going to be meeting, you just met on the video, Belinda O'Day, and she's from Mount Barker, from the country town where I grew up and my family were, and so I know they're online at the moment watching as well, and I just say well done to you, and keep doing fantastic work, and you'll get to hear more about what Mount Barker is doing in the rural communities and the Playlab space. And finally, just to say with the live streaming that there is, sorry, I've gone too far, Lo Warburton, and she'll be reviewing this later. She was the kindergarten mother of a child that I taught in my very first cohort, and we connected up with her. I chased her up because when I went to Perth, and I thought she won't remember me, but she did. And she said, well, actually, my son Rolly and I were just talking about you the other day, the kind of impact that and the importance of early childhood has gone through into his life. And I thought, how amazing to, because normally people don't really remember the kindergarten teacher, but unless they do something extraordinary, I guess. But it's just an absolute joy. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is we have amazing collaboration with Ellen Eriksson Odegaard, and she has got a group of people having breakfast together at this very moment at the Western Norway University of Applied Sciences, also celebrating this launch. We have Lithuania, we have Indonesia and a whole group of professors there. We have Brazil online. We also have, if I get my notes, we also have Germany online as well, because these are parts of the kinds of collaborations that we've been having over time. And we actually have a whole series of universities from China. So Beijing Normal University, East China Normal University, South China Normal University, Northeast China Normal University, Nanjing Normal University, and I'll just stop there. So it's to say this is not just for Australia, it's also an internationally important moment for us and for early childhood education and in the early years of school that we want to take forward. So let me now begin and tell you a little bit about the team that is going to be working on this. We have Maria with us, and Maria, would you please stand? Where are you? Our Senior Research Fellow. Can you please welcome her with me? Thank you, Maria. Maria, we've stolen her, and I won't say where from, and I'll give you all the details, but we've stolen her. But we also have with us online Glikuria, and Glikuria is actually, we've stolen her from Greece. One of the most, like with Maria, one of the most amazing minds I have ever come across. She's just a knockout, and I just can't wait for her to arrive later in the year when she formally starts. And we also have, via Oxford, we have Prabhat, and my colleague that I've collaborated with, Professor Anne Edwards from Oxford over the years, she said Prabhat is one of the best PhD students she had ever supervised. So I've got this incredible team of people that I'm working with, but I also have this sensational person called Dr. Sue March. Well, where are you, Sue? Please stand. Sue's been on this journey with all of our other ARCs over the years, and also did her PhD through that process. So it's just exciting to have the team together here. So now that you've met the team, you can see, and our colleagues at Peninsula would have been walking through this building, this room. This is our Conceptual Playlab. It'll still keep changing. And part of the people who will be in that Conceptual Playlab, in addition to the Senior Research Fellows, are our existing PhD students have a home there, and some of you are here tonight. I mentioned Rebecca, but we've got Kulsum, Sian Yu and Ami are some of our colleagues that are here with us tonight as PhD students already along the way. But we also have Maria starting next year. And Sinjin is his very first day. Sinjin, would you like to stand up? Very first day today. And unfortunately, Hardung was unable to stay because of family commitments, but she's from the Faculty of Engineering. And John, where are you? John, are you here? Yep, at the back. John and I are co-supervising her through, but she's through the Faculty of Engineering. So, and we've got many more that are coming through next year, all part of this amazing project. So, academic affiliates, we've of course got Professor Joanne Baird, who's the director of the department at Oxford, and we also have Colette Murphy and Colette, both of them, Colette's from Trinity, both of them are involved in this project as international collaborators in different ways, and we'll be sending out more information about their amazing contributions. So, now I'm sorry that was so long, and I could have gone even on and on and on because there's so many people involved in this work. It is a community, as Lucas said, a community of researchers, and it takes time to build that community. What I want to share with you tonight is a little bit about the problem that we're trying to solve as a group. I want to give you a little bit of a background to mapping the research that's fed into that, but because this is a public lecture, it's organised around lots of examples and video material to make it a little more engaging, so I don't have you falling asleep on me as we go along, and also to then give you a little more detail about actually how we're going to do this research, so a quick overview of that, and how you can become involved, because we have a lot of early childhood teachers and educators and primary teachers here tonight that I'm hoping you'll all sign up and be involved in this research over the next 5 years in a number of different ways. So, broadly, we know a lot about early childhood education. We know it's foundational to a society and that it's had a huge impact in relation to outcomes for children. People like James Heckman have done economic modelling around when you invest in the early years, you save taxpayers' money later on through incarcerations and intervention and so on. This is all very well established. And we know that literacy outcomes, 2 years of preschool are even better than 1 year, and that's work that's come from New Zealand in particular. So we know a lot about that. We know that it makes a difference to mathematics for children if they have quality experiences in their early years. But what we don't know much about is what does this mean for the area of STEM? So this is like a big gap. We know a little bit through small-scale studies, but we don't know an awful lot about it. So this is one of the problems that we're going to try and solve. And we also know that a lot of the tools that are available to early childhood educators and teachers in the early years of school have been built on research for the area of STEM, have been built on research that's primarily come from non-play-based settings. And so what has tended to happen is that these models of teaching for STEM have been based on research that's not directly applicable to the exciting play-based spaces that we have in our kindergartens, in our playgroups, even in family homes and so on. Not that we're specifically going to create models for that. But it's to say that what's happened then in the literature, which over the years has bothered me significantly, and that is in the literature, early childhood educators and primary teachers are often positioned in a way, a deficit positioning. It's kind of like you blame the teacher for not teaching enough of it. So why aren't you teaching more science? Why aren't you teaching more technologies? And you know, what about this engineering? Why aren't you doing engineering? Because we're hearing a lot about that in the literature and out in the media. So this is kind of deficit positioning. The research that I've been involved in over the years is the exact opposite. It's actually a credit model, as Margaret Carr would say generally. A credit model that actually looks at the strengths and tries to develop the tools that actually will create opportunities for teachers to be able to do the work that's so important and to have research that's foundational to STEM for young children in play-based settings. And so this is my greatest worry as well as my greatest hope that we will have, as you'll hear in a little while, we'll have some possibilities to actually have the right toolkit. So rather than to blame teachers for not teaching enough of this area, let's get the toolkit right. Let's have the right type of research that's actually based on young children who are in play-based settings. So what have we learned over the 10 years leading up to this? And as Lucas said, it's a journey. And so the first kind of question that I've been interested in, so what does engineering education look like for infants, toddlers and preschools? It's kind of a question that hasn't been necessarily asked. Nobody really knows. Nobody knows this. There are projects around for school, there are after-school care programs, there's various things that are happening. But what does it actually mean for an infant who's thinking with engineering concepts? What does it mean when the infant becomes a toddler and uses that knowledge and builds it? What does it mean when they become a preschooler? What does it mean when they enter into school? What does it mean when they go further forward into the years of schooling? Nobody really knows that, and we need this kind of information. But what about for girls? We know that the profession, engineering profession, is really worried about this. Engineers Australia say that in the profession there is only 12% of female engineers. So why is this so? What's going on? We do know some things from the research that we've done. We don't know lots of things, but we know some things. And so I just want to give you a little taste of some things. And I'm going to begin by just showing you this design that was part of a project. And I'll talk to you a little more about it in a moment. But I want you, in the next slide, in a little moment, Luke, a little moment, we're going to play this little video clip. It's quite long. But what I'd like you to do is have a look at the child and be patient with her because she's thinking about explaining this design, which has come out of a big project, which is called a Grabby hand machine, and I'll explain in a little while why. And the Grabby hand machine was a collective design by a group of children. So this is not about design of one child. This is about the design and this child sharing this, of the kind of engineering principles that she's now sharing with us as a result of experiencing an engineering play world, and a conceptual play world, which I'm going to talk about more with our Conceptual Playlab. And so let's play this video. It's about a minute, so just bear with me and just enjoy this.
You see, inside this part, there are, right in there, just there, there's a wheel with an axle to make the hand move like this.
Okay.
And the fingers are sort of strawn with little wheels. And the boom has inside it a chain, the wheel and axle connector, and it runs along, and it's there.
And you made
Connected to the boom, which is the arm, you see, and the hand has a wrist connected to it, and with the wrist, it's to move. And the fulcrum is the elbow.
right.
So, then you should have fingernails. The fingernails can fold up because the tiny treasures can slip inside them, then the Grabby hand will pull it up. And then probably the parts of this will probably be connected there, and it's a special machine because it grabs the treasure and dragon and it's like a seesaw because the heaviest thing stays on the ground and the lightest thing goes up in the air and gets stuck there.
Right.
And we could do then at 6 a.m. we did this story in the morning, so it's pretty popular around the world, and soon I think all of us should make a book about it. So that's the end.
Okay, that is the end of that, yes. So thank you for being patient, listening to the whole of what she had to say. And I think this is an important part of the kind of research that we do, where we try and capture these imagination in engineering and imagination in science and imagination in play moments. And this is just an example of one dimension of a collective design. So the question then becomes what does this mean in terms of the way in which we're working in what we've called an engineering play world? And you can see just some wonderful images there of using the iPad to bring to life those engineering principles so that the collective design can be activated. And they're the kinds of things that we're hoping to do more of as part of our research. So that takes me to this idea of the engineering play world and the idea of having the kinds of models that are needed. How is it that children can be like that? What is it that takes place? I'm hoping you're all curious now about what's been happening. And what we have is, and I want to, particularly because of the need to foreground some dimensions here of the kinds of ways in which we start this work, which is always in relation to, and this was the storying around Robin Hood and a social problem arising, that the sense of equity and social justice and thinking through how to equally distribute the kinds of resources that the bad sheriff had taken. So it's this idea of what are the kinds of social questions that come up. And we know from the literature more broadly that for girls and women in particular, this is an important part. And if we're thinking about a pipeline of engineers further down the track, what is it that will engage and really connect with children? So our research is already showing that engineering questions always need to be thought about in relation to social and technical scenarios. And so it's the social problems that are arising that children are wanting to solve, and they need engineering solutions. So this is a very different take to saying, let's have an activity and we'll see if we can teach some engineering principles. This is about a big picture, moving them through storying, the kinds of things that will then allow them to explore some of the ethics, some of the social injustice and social justice issues and so on. So it's not just one is in isolation of the other, because it's very important that when we have social problems that need engineering solutions, that learning concepts is then in the service of children's play. And as you heard Belinda in the video talking about in Mount Barker, how it's very easy over time, because there's a lot of money more recently been invested in and more highlighting of early childhood education, that governments and policy are wanting more greater outcomes for children. And we spend this money in the early years, where are outcomes? So this can be translated into quick fixes, can be translated into a push-down curriculum, and there's a huge worry about this in different countries around the world. And so what we're looking at is building this research around these bigger social problems that need engineering solutions in this particular example here. And this is the part of the impact we're trying to have. So as children are imagining going back in time and looking at meeting the castle engineer during the sheriff's time in Robin Hood, then children are actually able to not just be a part of that story by being in the imaginary play situation, which just happens to be the outdoor area, then they are also in these spaces because they have a purpose. They want to know more about how did the castle engineer, how does the moat go up? What can we learn from this in relation to making our own design to solve the problem about retrieving the treasure? As you heard the little girls say, we want to get the treasure and we use our fingers to be able to grip and pull it up. So this means that imagination in play and imagination in STEM is actually absolutely foundational to the kind of work that we're doing, because much of what we do in early childhood is the development of children's play, but to then explore how a child changes the meaning of an object and turning a stick, and that's the example, I'm sorry for those who've heard me say this many times, taking a stick, turning it into a hobby horse and riding around, this becomes the object changes its meaning. And we do the same in school. We take a stick, we call it a ruler, and we go and measure something. So it is the same kind of capacity development that's occurring. So and imagining what might be a standard unit in measurement, for instance. So these things really matter. So how do we build this? And that's part of the work that we're doing, is we have these models and we want to take them further afield. So then, as part of this too, we're very interested in the kind of technologies, design and technologies that we want to look at. So it's not just the construction area, but it's actually bringing together, and this was part of this, the drawbridge, as you can see. It's actually knowing about the kind of modelling that children do, and to be able to have a different orientation, because we know that older children suddenly stop drawing. They don't really stop drawing, for those of you who are in the arts area, but we know that there are periods where they become very conscious of what they can do. So if we're bringing the kind of orientation of a plan view, when a child can draw from a plan view as opposed to a front view, and our research has shown, depending on the cultural community that you're in, that most children will draw from a front view, often stylised, I'm sure we all know. But if they actually have the capacity to think from a plan view, then this opens up all sorts of ways of thinking and drawing, because they can start to express their ideas. And we know from our research with older children in the primary school, they then ask even more complex questions. They start saying, I live in a 2-storey house, but I don't know how to show the different levels. And they squish them all and draw a picture where they squish it all over each, the top level and the bottom level. So when you start to look at these kinds of ways that we can think about this feeds into not just models of practice, but it also feeds into curriculum development and the kinds of things that we'd be wanting to take forward. So in the early childhood period, it's about deepening the play, but it's deepening it with concepts, always in the service of the children's play. So, oops. Okay, so then that takes me to other part of the work we've been doing, and that's in relation to a scientific play world. So we've kind of loosely talked about engineering play world, and then a play world which focuses on design and technologies. Then if we're looking at introducing a scientific play world, then the work that I've been involved in, again, ARC funded research, Australian Research Council funded research, all of these are. And this one in the area of science in particular, children, very young children are small. It's really, really exciting if you're a small person in a big world to be looking at something that's smaller than you. And often we think children can't do these things, but our research shows they can, and they're excited by it. You think about the toddler, even the infant, who notices the small detail in a children's book. My colleague Bridie Rabin, Professor Bridie Rabin, will tell you heaps about that area. Children are really engaged in small detail. And so why not create these possibilities to be thinking about imagination? And I make the link with Barbara McClintock's work here in particular. There are many, we know from Albert Einstein, many different scientists have talked about their early life and how important play was for that, because they learned about visualisation. They learned about contradiction. They learned about modelling. They embodied the concepts, and the Barbara McClintock, as many of you probably know, changed the course of genetics totally with her jumping gene, because she imagined herself going down the microscope and studying the cornfields in her mind, and then looking in the Petri dish and starting to connect all those things, because for women in science in those days when she was working, she didn't have the resources to have other assistants to do things. So she was doing it all. And through the doing of it all meant she made these amazing connections. And I think that's what young children are doing when they're actually engaged in play. And scientific play world, and here we have an example of it from our research, where children have been looking at and studying compost for a range of reasons, and I don't have time to go into the details, are going into the imaginary compost bin some days. Some days it's being a drop of water, so they're inside the drop of water, being the things they've been looking at in the pond water that they've collected and studied using the various different microscopic tools that are now so easily available to children. And this has meant that children can start to engage in and think about all sorts of things around them in new ways, because the digital tools, so this is a very important part of our research, the digital tools, this is not about the moral panic of screen time. This is about saying, actually, we've got these amazing tools available. Children can actually access information so easily. They can actually look at a spider digitally. They can use Google Earth and zoom down, as you'll see in a moment. I'll talk about that too. And they can do so many different things that they couldn't do before because they had the minds to, but they didn't have the physical access to. And so children can zoom in on something, and so not in my day, trying to look down a real microscope was a bit of a problem. But now we have all these amazing tools that give us this possibility. So what this 10 years of research has taught me, and probably more, because I've always been interested in the relationship between play and learning. Really, really important question. People really worry about it because of the push-down curriculum, but also people really worry about it in terms of in many other countries who want a more playful curriculum because the curriculum is a bit formal for young children and they want creative, innovative citizens graduating from their schools. So the problem is still the same. The central problem is still the same. What's the relationship between play and learning? And we're still trying to crack that one. And that's a very important part of the work that we'll be doing. But importantly, all of this work that's been done previously has given us some models of science play worlds, models of engineering play worlds, technology play worlds. And it builds on teachers' strengths because they are experts in play. They're experts in child development, they're experts in making observations of children, and they're experts in literacy. So why do we keep in the literature blaming teachers for not getting this right when they have all this expertise? And as I mentioned before, it's because they've never been given the right tools. So we are making a difference at Monash University for that. We are changing the story so that we have the tools, but we need your help. And we need your help because we need to be able to explore the ways in that we can do this around Australia. We have these models and we need your help in being able to see what that looks like in culturally diverse communities. What does that look like in the communities in which, rural communities? What does it look like for different kinds of children and different kinds of settings? So that's what we want to do. And so one of the things we've learned in recent times is that sometimes the play world model can feel a little overwhelming because it looks like you're changing everything in your classroom or centre. But what I want to introduce you to is this idea of a pop-up conceptual play world, just like you have a pop-up cafe. So it just pops up. And you have it for a period of time that you as an educator know will work because you know your children. And so this is you met Belinda, and I know she's there hopefully celebrating, and she talked about this pop-up play world in essence. That's what we did. We didn't do it over a week, we didn't do it over a term, we didn't do it over 12 months, which some of the people we've collaborated with actually take and do over a long time. We just did it in a morning. And I have to say I was terribly out of my comfort zone because Lara, where's Lara? Lara made me actually do the teaching. Where is she? She's hiding. There we are. She says, oh, Marilyn, we'll just get you to show them how to do it. It's been a long time since I was responsible for a group of children. And, but I've been in the field on many, many occasions in different ways. So what is this conceptual play world? If we can just look at the pop-up version, it's selecting the story. It's selecting the story that creates some emotional connection. So it might be a social issue, an ethical issue. It might be all sorts of things. And Rosie's Walk is very simple, a very simple book, but it's perfect for a pop-up because it lends itself to, well, there is this drama, this little bit of tension. Is the fox actually going to get Rosie and following Rosie around, for those of you who know the story? So this means that we have different dimensions. So choosing the right kind of book is important. But it doesn't mean you have to use the book exactly as it is, because I, in doing this, created all sorts of additional things. So choosing the book so that when you know the children. So this was a rural community, that's why I chose Rosie's Walk, because I knew they probably knew about chickens and hens and foxes, and we actually listened to fox sounds on my phone and tried to work out, if they'd heard those sounds in their community. It was kind of that kind of conversation that you have. All the teachers in the room are nodding and going, yes, of course. And then building an empathy for the characters is really important. We've learned that from our research, and that the drama is really important, that creates that emotional tension. And I really want to emphasise that a conceptual play world is this kind of emotionally felt experience as much as it is a cognitive experience. They just can't be separated out. And we have to celebrate that and remember it. And a plot that can lend itself to some sort of problem situation is really, really important. So it's not just role-playing a story, it's actually thinking through what is the problem situation that you want to have in this book. And it may be that the book doesn't have a problem in it, but that doesn't mean you can't create a problem. Like I did, I picked my phone up after we'd been outside, entering the Playworld, and you'll see some images in a moment, and we came back and we listened to a message that had been left on my phone because we were out, we were busy on Rosie, and it was Rosie's cousin, and you'll hear some references to this concept in the last video that I'm going to share with you in a moment. And in that, the children heard sort of bark, 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 bark. I'm lost. I can't find my way to Rosie's farm. Can you help me? This kind of idea. So you're creating a problem. You amplify the problem. So that's the first thing, thinking that all through, designing the imaginary space. So what will be the space? Do you remember I said play? The definition of play I'm working with is you change the meaning of an object, you give it a new meaning. Like a stick becomes a hobby horse or a measurement tool. You change what's there and it's in the children's minds. But you might have a series of props that support you in that. So we can see this is the story of me telling you about the images of the fox. Then the mapping that's needed to help solve the problem. We need to make a map, not just of Rosie's farm, and we did all of that as well, but also the maps. This is where you can bring in all sorts of different kinds of tools that are needed for this process, like Google Maps. And we did that. I printed them out, and we looked at. We went right down with our different maps to the playground, and so the children were looking from a plan view at the local kindergarten outdoor area. So it was creating this space, but you have to enter. So this is the third dimension, entering this space and exiting it in character. So the children actually chose to be, as you heard Belinda talking about, different kinds of characters as they entered into this situation. So being hens. But what's different here is that the teachers, the educators, are all in character as well. And we know from our research that even when people think, oh, who's going to control the class, the teachers do it in character. So it's very easy. If something happens, you just, in character, create a new scenario, or you say, oh, we need a letter to solve that, or we need to phone up someone, or this is a dangerous space. How could we do this and so the conversation begins. And, planning the problem, what the play inquiry might be, is really central to this, and I've mentioned that already as well. And this takes us, and you can see some of the images here. Sorry, this is all available for those of you trying to take photos of it. It is already available through. You'll see on the last slide. You can track all this. And planning the interactions. This is a really important part. And why this is really important is that what we have is, where we can, have more than one adult. In early childhood settings, or even when you're bringing groups of, in the early years of school together, you can bring more groups together and have more adults, involve families and so on. But it's really important to have, in character, different kinds of roles and planning that. Because we know from the research, in particular, and our research has shown this as well, but the central idea came from Russia, from Elena Kravtsova, which is that teachers take on pair roles. So one teacher might be with the children trying to solve the problem, and another teacher might be leading it. so that they have an expert in the room, because for too long early childhood educators have been made to feel that they can't actually say anything about concepts. It's kind of like Helen Hedges talks about smuggling in concepts to learn in play-based settings. Well, here we have the children want this problem solved, and can we find an expert? So we go back in time and we meet, you know, the castle engineer, or we use YouTube and so on. So we have different roles, but also the teacher can be in the under position, which they usually are in an interest-based program. It's always the children's interests only. It's not necessarily, and you need to watch that space, because Rebecca has got a stunning PhD that's actually studying all of this. So it's really, really important to think about the role you take and how you will do that with the children. Doesn't mean you're stuck in the same role the whole time. It can change from moment to moment, but it's the planning that becomes important. So even in the pop-up, I planned with the teachers. I said, and they had never done one of these, pop-up Playworld, Conceptual Playworld. I said, well, can we have some different characters? So I said, well, I can be a bee, and Belinda said, well, I'd like to be the fox, as you can see there. And we had the other teacher take on the role as the chicken. So, and the children, they chose what they wanted to do. So we role-played out and outside doing this as a simple, quick pop-up. And this was the beginning of this whole journey. And so you saw footage of this already. But it's this idea about thinking who's going to take what character and what role that might mean, because it supports, in the first instance, being able to do this. After a while, it's much more organic. But in the first case, it's important to do that. So Belinda's our first recruit to start in our research over the next 5 years. And so we're really pleased about that. And this research is actually feeds into the idea of the conceptual play world, defining the case examples of conceptual play world that we want to develop and share more broadly. So we want to learn alongside of and with educators and teachers as we do this, because it is a collective, it's a community of practice that we're seeking to further. And because there isn't one model, we have some conceptual ideas about a conceptual play world. We have a pop-up, and you'll see in a moment we have a more developed one. But what we want to do is see what this means across Australia. And so Early Childhood Australia has already volunteered to support this process. So we'll have a range of webinars and various other things that will come along over the next 5 years as we share your story that you work with us on to change practice. I keep pressing the wrong button. So this is really the third pillar of the research that I've mentioned. There are 2 other pillars, and these other 2 pillars are important because we need to be able to take this fully blown conceptual play world forward, because we've also been piloting and working with colleagues, and you're going to meet them in a moment, on this land of learning for the early years of school. And so this is the example. We're going to have a look at this video. This video is quite long, but it's kind of wraps it up. And then I've just got 2 quick slides at the very end. So if we could have that, please, Luke.
Research has shown that imagination in play and imagination in learning develops children's learning of concepts.
You have to train to go in a rocket. It says inside the sun, here's the moon, and there's the earth.
In Land of Learning, primary school children wonder, imagine, inquire, and want to learn concepts to help solve the social problems that arise.
But the moon don't have any water.
The moon has no water. Based on research, this video is an example of an evidence-based model. The evidence-based model explores the nature of play and learning in a way that motivates children and engages adults in wanting to explore science concepts in primary schools.
And then we made the rocket and we fly to the moon.
Land of Learning is a great way for teachers to motivate children to learn concepts, and we can help you design such a program. When teachers design imaginary situations and introduce social problems, our research has shown that children can and do engage with 21st century concepts.
There's something about the spacesuits that no one's mentioned yet. They have auto heat, but that uses up power. Say this was an asteroid and
But how do we set up a land of learning playworlds for primary schools? This video is designed to walk you through the steps. These teachers chose the story of The Secret Garden by Francis Hodgson Burnett.
Is where he perched on the little heap of earth, and he showed me the key.
It was the starting point for their land of learning adventure, which turns their school environment into space travel.
We selected the science concept relating to the story because we were thinking about, again, that whole idea of the magical, the mystical, and the children's fascination with something bigger than the world, you know, the solar system, the moon, and the Earth's place in it.
And really, we learnt you can choose any story and any science concept, and if you use imagination to link them, you can create a problem and the links.
The curriculum content focuses on the relations between the Earth, Moon and Sun.
Oh, it's all January, February, March.
There are 5 things to think about when planning and implementing a land of learning playworld in a school setting. The first step is selecting an engaging story.
So Oriana was going through a list, we'd sort of shortlisted it to a few, and when she said The Secret Garden, I said yes, because I remember my mother had bought it for me. I sort of had an emotional connection with it already.
And we thought by choosing a book such as The Secret Garden, we could encourage the children to, have empathy with the characters, but also help them to see how if you seek beyond yourself, you grow as a person.
The next step is to design the environment for the land of learning.
We designed the space around the Land of Learning Playworld by thinking of what we had. We had a wonderful climbing frame that is enormous that gave us the opportunity to think about going into the rocket ship, which was fantastic. So we had the opportunity to use not just the classroom as a learning space, designs, special space, but also what we had around us to sort of like transport the children, if you like, in different areas to completely encourage them to be immersed in that concept.
The training camp or school had various names, but the children really made that their own, so that we just kind of had a space allocated for that and a time, but then they turned it into a whole routine that involved marching and all these sorts of things. So I feel like the children made that play space come alive.
The third step is the planning for the entry and exit into the playworld.
NASA is ready, let's go to the launching pad.
That was the purpose of the training school.
That's right,
and so that involved things, so getting into our imaginary costumes, we put our spacesuits on.
Both children and teachers decide what character they will be, and everybody enters the land of learning together.
The imaginary space is an absolute joy for some children. For other children, it's more daunting and they need encouragement. So we did things, we gave some children special roles. So we had children taking measurements with clipboards and doing calculations and things. They were collecting data to send off to NASA. Who else do we need?
I'm Mary.
Fabulous. We would role model as well of us getting into character, so we might yell out, I'm Mary, or you're Colin,
that's right.
or
and that's what
I'm an engineer today, and then we found that the children would join in and they would, we'd end up with 5 Collins.
And that's what we did before we were going to enter into a space like the Secret Garden. We encouraged the children to assign themselves a role so that they knew before we got there.
Everyone exits the land of learning playworld together. It's time to enter real life again.
I'm locking the secret garden.
The fourth step is to plan the problem that will arise before or during the land of learning playworld.
So you've gone to the moon on some kind of mission?
The recce.
And
I'm guessing, if it's a distress signal, hasn't gone really well.
No, yeah, that's, yeah.
And you've landed on the far side of the moon?
Yes, that's right.
Navigation went wrong.
Explain why I was going up there.
It's cold.
Yeah, it's cold.
You can't see a lot.
Limited resources.
No solar power.
We want to really encourage the sense of urgency. So we want the children to be scientists, engineers, so we've got to learn so that we can then
and empathise with this.
Your battery could be at a percentage.
Hello, children, it's cousin Robin, Red Robin's cousin, and I'm stuck on the moon, and I need your help.
The children learn the concepts so they can solve the problem. How to rescue cousin Robin.
I'm sending out a message via satellite, and I hope you can help me with that, and I hope you can come and help me.
The problem is what motivates the children to learn.
She's up there on the far side and she's thinking about living, non-living conditions.
It's dangerous. She didn't bring tools.
Why did she have to make a vegetable garden on the moon? Why didn't she just make one on Earth?
To see if the next generation of life could actually live in the lunar base.
Finally, plan the interactions you have with the children and each other. It's a way teachers can build 21st century conceptual learning.
We had to prepare how we would support various children in various ways. So that involved, one teacher might be encouraging children to get into character, another one might be giving some more direct information about the science concepts. Most of the children were working on a prototype of block building, and it was very obvious what they were doing, and they were using all of the scientific terminology. And I saw one of the girls off to the side and I thought, oh, she's working on her own. I thought, I'm just going to go and ask her what she's doing. And she said, I'm building mission control. And I thought, wow. So it looks like you're off doing your own thing, and it's not related, and perhaps you haven't absorbed some of these problems and concepts, all these things that we're talking about. And I thought, no, you're building mission control for everyone. And I was so glad I'd taken the time to speak with her and not made any assumptions.
This was the first time I did Playworlds, so for me it was just wonderful to be part of the learning, being present with the children and seeing where they take it. I think as teachers intuitively we know that play works and play is the child's world, and we enjoy playing as well. That's why we're teachers. And so often we find it difficult to understand why a school would not take that approach. So for us it was so easy. We're playing, we're dealing with the concept, and for us to tell other schools, have a go, do it, play around with it, have a plan, just observe where the kids are going with the learning.
It was complex learning for us, and then a celebration of actually, even at that level of complexity, it's fun. We can still have fun with that.
Yeah, and losing control, just letting it go. And schools sometimes are a place of control. That's what it is. We're controlling the learning, we're controlling how they learn, what they're learning, and the outcome.
Are we landing? This is amazing.
Amazing. Well done, Tim.
Well done, guys.
Well done.
There's important work to be done, and that's what I care about. Please don't worry about
strong TV.
18% battery power left.
In many respects, this encapsulates that full-blown conceptual play world. So I've talked about the pop-up play world and the conceptual play world as a fully blown one. So anywhere along that continuum could be you, trying these ideas out and taking it forward. So just to conclude, I want to say that we watch this space because we're wanting to do this work around infants and toddlers as well, because we think this is so important, and this is always an underrepresented area. We know that from the research, so we really want to engage people in this. And so we're hoping that with our second recruits, Windermere down at Peninsula, that we can start this journey, but we also have others who are part of this already that we want to take forward. So what are we essentially doing is is we have the launch today. We want to amplify the research. We want to make it accessible, and the videos are a way to do that. It's part of sharing the research to make a difference in Australia. And those stories will be different because children are different, contexts are different. And that's what we want to test out as part of the And we also have the app that I mentioned before for being able to do this. And we want to use this for capturing imagination in play and imagination in STEM moments. And so it's kind of watch that space, and we'll tell you more about it. And those 3 pillars, I only mentioned one, but we're going to work further to take this forward. And I want to leave the last word to Belinda, because I think she captures, in essence, what I'm hoping that you will go back to schools, kindergartens, communities, early childhood students, if you're academics, and see if we can't take this further forward. So if we could press the play on that one, please, Luke.
Yeah, I think I would really like to be involved in the research because the value that it has for children's learning, and I think it will really enhance my teaching and what I am trying to achieve with my children.
Okay, so that's the last word. So thank you very much for coming along. For those of you interested, we're still recruiting for PhD students, so you can find out more. And you can also, my daughter Freya, who's here, giggles because I've only been on Twitter a short time. So I'm still a bit of a novice, but I'm getting there. So you can start to tweet. We have Facebook as well. And so we'll be putting out information around that as well. And we have a website. So it'll just keep evolving over the 5 years. So thank you everyone for coming tonight.
How cool is the Conceptual Playworld? It's awesome. Just a quick, because I've got the microphone so I can do this. Just a personal observation was my 5-year-old daughter, Millie, chose Rosie's Walk last night as the book to read. Oh. And I read it to her as it was read to me by my mum when I was a kid. But the thing about listening to that, and I've heard some of that before, was thinking about Millie reading Rosie's Walk. It is like I've been doing it in black and white film, and then hearing you talk, it suddenly goes to blazing colour because of the possibilities of what's going on in her mind. You're taking us into that universe in much the same way as other brilliant researchers have done in their own mind, but also within the minds of the kids. Just outstanding. Okay, so we've got time for a few questions. We have people tuned in the interwebs from Brazil, China and India, I'm told. We also have our colleagues and friends at Peninsula. So I thought with the remaining time that we've got time for a couple of questions. I'd prefer, ideally it'd be great if we could get a question from each of the groups if it's possible, but first I'm going to throw it to this crowd. I've got a question, by the way, but I want someone else to ask a question first. Anyone? All right, I'll start it off. That's great. Well, maybe we'll just sit and talk for the rest of the evening. Pull up a chair. I just want to ask you a question. So when you've got them solving they're addressing a social issue, and they're coming up with some kind of visual representation of how they would solve the problem. What is the first thing that runs through your mind when you're looking at that? Take me into your head, just for the first few minutes of what are you looking for?
Still connected? Yep. So as a researcher? Okay, so as a researcher, because I think children's minds are amazing, and because not only are they lower down on the ground, they're very finely tuned into many different things. So when I'm looking, I look to see how the conditions that have been created have given the possibility for that child to say what they just said or to do what they just did. So as a researcher, I'm fascinated by what is it that made that possible? What was it that had the child talk about fulcrum? I mean, I knew what had happened because we had been documenting it. But what are the ways in which educators create these conditions that actually open up possibilities? But the other part of it that I think is really, really challenging is that there is this emotional connection that children have. This is a really important part of research that a survey is a little difficult to do with a 5-year-old. It's about taking digital video documentation and looking for these emotionally charged moments that actually you can see the light bulbs going on in the children's mind, and any educator sees that. So as a researcher, I look at that and then I try and trace back what happened before, what happened after, and where did that thinking grow and develop, and how did it change, and what were the things that caused that, which is how we came up with the conceptual Playworld model. We learned that emotional connection was important. We learned that the social problems to be solved with concepts was important, but we also learned that teachers are really talented if they're in a context where they can open up those spaces for children.
Fantastic. Crazy talk there about empowering teachers and the importance of play, you know. Okay, so we've got a question. This will be from Peninsula? No, online.
No,
Chantal.
this is going to be online. So we've got a couple of hundred online, Marilyn, I'm sure from different countries. We've got a question from Omar. They're asking, is it acceptable to apply this approach to learning setting as well, or is it only for play learning setting?
Okay, so Omar, thank you for being online. It's one of our fantastic postgraduate students that's graduated, so Dr. Omar now. It depends on how you're thinking about this as a problem, so as a research problem, and I assume that's what he's asking. So if it's a research problem about how does this look differently in different contexts, then this becomes, like Lucas was saying, this becomes then the driving question for analysis. So if it's in a rural community, what is it that really matters? So in Mount Barker, what really matters there for children's learning is probably going to be quite different for what matters for children learning in central city, for instance. And so these things really matter. And the way that we look at our research in our Conceptual Playlab and what's led up to it is that we're always thinking about 3 things when we're doing this kind of work. One is the kind of societal expectations of early childhood, of primary schools and so on. What is it society wants for its citizens? So we look at that because that means that the kinds of rules and regulations that are created at the institutional level, that drives them. So if it's a setting where play is not as important, that can come from a societal perspective, giving institutions the right or not the right to do something. So this really matters because when we're analysing what at the personal level for the child, that's the 3rd level, when we're looking at what this child can do in a preschool at that moment in a rural community because the ratio is so many children to a staff in one country and then in another country it might be very different. This also matters. So if there's 60 children and 1 adult, that's a regulation that creates different demands upon teachers and children. So we look at that, and that's why the work is so complex. So Omar's question is about actually the complexity of this kind of research, because you cannot understand what a child does if you don't understand the institutional practices around the child, and you can't understand the institution and the child's capacity to do something unless you understand what society values. And so all of those things are always at play. So when you're looking in your microscope, so to speak, you're looking for all those things at the same time.
Fantastic. We have a question. Megan will get you the microphone.
Marilyn, I'm curious, once you've created these spaces in which children are so agentic and so engaged, have you noticed, or can you give us some examples of how the capabilities, the amazing capabilities they demonstrate in those spaces pop up when they're back into the real world, as it were? Do you find they're transferable, or do they tend to stay in the play world?
I can answer that in many different ways, but what I will say is that our 3 pillars of research, I mentioned the Playworld, the conceptual Playworld of the model, but also what we're doing is as part of our 5 years, is we're looking to start the journey with the infants and document how these infants change their thinking over time as a result of what they're experiencing. And that will form part of our research, so when they become toddlers, when they become preschoolers, and when they enter school. So our work is to better understand those kinds of things that you're asking about. And I know that you're talking about maybe one institution, so at that moment where they're in a kindergarten or they're in a school, so that they have the Playworld. What do they do differently? I know from my colleagues, and we haven't, this is my colleagues who are doing this kind of work, that it does make a difference. And when children are so agentic, then they ask different questions. They ask not just different questions, they think about things differently. And a lovely example from even long time ago research is when a child who understands an ecosystem has what we call a theoretical model in their head of how something works. So an ecosystem is a theoretical model, so that you've got different dimensions of that, you know how the system works. When a child goes out into the area outside and starts to look at a slater, we know from our ARC funded research in the past that a child who has a conceptual model of an ecosystem doesn't just look and go, oh, that's interesting. They actually look with purpose, because they know that they're going to look for food source first to find the slater, if they've got this as their intention. Or they're going to look at what else is around that particular creature. So they're thinking theoretically already, and they're going to look at the form and structure of whatever they're looking at. So what they're doing is they're not just looking up in the sky, but they're actually looking in new ways, because they're working with this theoretical model of an ecosystem. So a child who has this experience of a play world comes out with a very connected theoretical model of thinking. This is our work has shown us. And when they have this way of thinking, then everything they do changes, because they're thinking in a whole new way. Like the plan view, to have this new way of thinking, to know that you can design something and then make something and then draw a design of it. There are all these different dimensions of children's thinking. When they have that, they act, and they are different human beings. And so to put it in a nutshell, when a child has this experience, regardless of what the real world might look like, you have made an enormous contribution to their capacity to engage with it. And whether they are restricted or the possibilities are opened up for them, they are a richer person for this. And we know that even when they go from and Esme's here with her work, and I'm sure she could talk about this, with the kinds of students that graduate from her school when they go into secondary schools, and they have a very different kind of could have a very different kind of experience, they still ask the interesting questions. They still enabled to do more than what they could before. So I think, for me, it doesn't matter, because we've changed that person. You've made the cake and you can't undo it and go back to the ingredients. It's forever.
Thank you. There was one last question. I think we'll take one more for this evening. So.
Thank you. I just have a question, because in this kind of play-based learning environment, I noticed that children are more engaged in this kind of activities. I just wondering, in this kind of activities as an educator, how to make sure that they're not injured in this kind of activities? Yeah.
Okay, so the occupational health and safety looms. Yes, you build it in. I can remember in one of the examples, there was a particular tool left in one of the play structures, and the teacher just built it in and created a little story around, oh, we can't go in there just yet. There's some problems that we have to go and get our iPads, and we need to do this, and we need to have a look, and when we find it, we need to do X, Y, Z. So that's just a very simple example. But are you thinking more like with the Land of Learning, where they're up on the structures and things? Is it the kind of play practice that you're worried about?
Just hang on a minute, we'll get to the mic so that people online can hear.
I'm just trying to get to the essence of your question.
Because I think, one, educators should take care of a lot of children, so sometimes probably we would lose control in some situations.
Okay, yes, I see what you're saying. So it's about how to still be the teacher in charge. And in this approach, the children are so engaged, and you can build the story around managing children and what they do very, very comfortably, because they're so engaged, and you can introduce more complexity. If a child is doing something that you don't particularly want them to do, then you build it into the story of what's going on. And so you become like if you're in role as the engineer, and I'm just making this up at the top of my head, if a child is doing something and they're not engaged and you want them engaged, then as a role play, as part of this narrative, you can just go to the child and say, "Oh, just need your help at the moment. I have this problem. I need you to come and help me. Such and such has happened. Do you think you could carry this, or could you take this and move it across here?" Or you give them something, as you would normally do in a classroom, and how parents do with their children when they're trying to get them into the bath. They'll give them a toy to say, "Oh, this would float really well in the bath." So it's that kind of, you work with where they're at and what. And you use the story and you stay in character. So if you're being, and I'm referring to Rebecca again, if you're being the mummy dragon in the story, then the mummy dragon wants the baby dragons to come with her on the journey to wherever it is. And so if the baby dragons are not so interested at that moment, then she can create the drama around that, and then they follow and go with her. So you don't have to pop out and be the teacher controlling. What you do is you use the narrative. You can make it complex, and from that, the children re-engage if that's the issue that you're trying to solve.
Okay, great. OHS and dragons, this has got everything. So I'm just going to start to wrap it up, and I started by talking about the fact that Marilyn's at the top of the mountain, and that getting to the top of the mountain takes time. And it takes a whole range of people and institutions like Monash to happen. But now a lot of it sits with you. We want you to come along on this journey, on this project. There was a registration list that I'd strongly urge you and welcome you to tick the box if you want to stay in touch with the project and keep up to date. There will be an event survey for this. We'd like to see how we did. And I encourage you to join the mailing list for our future events. But one other important thing that struck me again was getting to the top of the mountain was building on a decade of Australian Research Council work. And I'm just going to draw attention to you again, Professor Jefferson. I'm sorry. You thought it was all over for you tonight. You could just sit and listen. No, but the point is that this couldn't happen without long-term sustained investment, the kind of which uniquely comes from the Australian Research Council. And you can see the unfolding of this incredibly layered, complex project, but emerging from that kind of support. So thank you, and thank you to your organisation. And the other people that helped this kind of thing to happen are the people who facilitated this. So I'm looking at Chantel, I'm looking at Megan, Luke, Melinda, who's out there somewhere, and the student ambassadors, and to all of you for coming tonight, and most importantly of all, our laureate fellow, Professor Marilyn Fleer, Laureate Professor Marilyn Fleer. Thanks very much for coming, everybody, and congratulate her on a great lecture. Still thinking about the dragons and OH&S. Have a good night, everybody.